It began so quietly that even she didn't notice at first. A shift so subtle, so gradual, it could have been mistaken for nothing at all. But somewhere between late nights spent thinking and early mornings where the world felt too heavy, Sara realized something had changed in her. She was feeling more sensitive. Not just to people's words, but to their silences. Not just to moments, but to the spaces in between them. She had always considered herself a strong person. The kind who didn't cry easily, who could carry the weight of a bad day without letting anyone see the strain in her shoulders. But lately, even small things could stir something deep inside her. A sad song on the radio, the way the evening sunlight touched the old brick walls of her street, the fleeting sadness in a stranger's eyes at the cafe, everything seemed to reach her heart more quickly, more deeply than before. At first, she brushed it off. Maybe I'm just tired, she told herself. Life had been a whirlwind lately. Work deadlines that stretched into weekends, friendships that had grown distant, a love life that felt like it had been packed away in some forgotten drawer. But tiredness didn't explain why she could no longer watch the news without tears pooling in her eyes, or why an old memory from years ago would suddenly hit her like a fresh wound. One evening, sitting by her bedroom window, Sara watched the rain fall against the glass. The city lights blurred into tiny fragments through the raindrops, each one trembling before sliding away. She realized she had been holding her breath, as if the whole scene was something fragile that might break if she moved too quickly. She exhaled slowly, her chest tightening, not from sadness, exactly, but from a strange, aching awareness of beauty. It was as if she could feel the pulse of the world more than ever before. Sara's best friend, Mira, noticed it too. "You've been quiet lately," she said one afternoon over coffee. "Not in a bad way, just different. More in your head, maybe?" Sara hesitated, unsure how to explain. "I don't know," she said finally. "It's like, everything is louder now, even the things that don't make a sound." Mira smiled knowingly. "Maybe you're just more connected to yourself." But Sara wasn't sure that was it. Connection sounded like something calm and steady. What she felt was different, more like standing in the middle of a storm where every raindrop carried a story. The sensitivity followed her everywhere. In the office, she would overhear colleagues talking in hushed tones, and her mind would spin, wondering if someone was hurting or in trouble. On the subway, she would catch the distant hum of a street musician's guitar, and her heart would swell as if she had known the melody all her life. Even her dreams had changed, they were richer now, filled with faces she couldn't place and emotions she couldn't name. It wasn't all bad, of course. There was a strange kind of beauty in it. Colors looked brighter. Conversations felt deeper. She found herself noticing details she would have missed before, the soft wrinkle near an old man's eyes when he smiled at his granddaughter, the way a cat curled itself so tightly into the corner of a shop's window display to stay warm. But there was also a heaviness that came with it. She couldn't just pass by things anymore. She felt everything. The world's pain seemed to seep into her bones, and sometimes, it was exhausting. She began avoiding crowded places because she would come home drained, as though she had absorbed too many emotions from too many people. One night, unable to sleep, Sara opened her journal and began to write. She didn't usually journal, her thoughts were private, often unspoken even to herself, but that night, the words came like a flood. She wrote about the small kindness she had witnessed that day when a young man gave up his seat for a pregnant woman. She wrote about the hurt she felt when an old friend had failed to reply to her message. She wrote about the way the sky had turned gold just before the sun slipped away. By the time she stopped, it was past 2 a.m. She stared at the pages, realizing she had written more in one night than she had in months. It struck her then that maybe she had been holding too much inside for too long, and this sensitivity was her body's way of forcing her to feel, to release, to stop pretending that everything was fine. The next day, she decided to visit her childhood home. She hadn't been there in years, not since her parents had moved away. But something about returning to the place where she had first learned to feel seemed important. Walking through the old streets, she noticed how small everything looked now. The park where she had played, the narrow alley where she had once hidden during games of hide-and-seek. When she reached the front gate, she stood there for a while, her fingers brushing over the rusted iron. Memories rose like gentle waves, her father's laughter as he fixed the bicycle chain, her mother calling her in for dinner, the way the summer air smelled of mangoes and dust. She didn't cry, but her chest felt heavy. This was the kind of heaviness that came from remembering who you were before life got complicated. She wondered if maybe that was part of why she was feeling more sensitive lately, not because something new had happened, but because old parts of her were waking up. On her way back to the city, she passed a bookstore and, on impulse, went inside. She picked up a small, worn copy of a poetry collection and began to read. The words felt like they were speaking directly to her, peeling away layers she hadn't realized she had. She bought the book and carried it home like a fragile treasure. That night, she read by the warm glow of her bedside lamp, and something inside her softened. It was as if the poems had given her permission to feel without explanation, without guilt. She didn't need to justify her emotions or understand them fully. They were simply part of her, and maybe they had always been. Still, the question lingered, why now? Why this sudden shift into deeper sensitivity? She could sense that the answer was somewhere just out of reach, like a shadow waiting to be understood. And then, one evening, it happened, a moment so small yet so powerful, it would change everything. She was walking home, the air cool against her skin, when she passed by a little boy sitting on the steps of an apartment building. His knees were drawn up, his face buried in his arms. Without thinking, she stopped. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked softly. The boy looked up, his eyes red from crying. He didn't say a word, but something in his expression hit her like a wave. In that instant, she knew. She understood, not with logic, but with the kind of knowing that comes from the heart. Her sensitivity wasn't a weakness, and it wasn't random. It was her soul's way of reaching out, of connecting to the invisible threads that tied people together. She felt more because she was meant to see more, to hold the emotions that others couldn't carry alone. But she didn't yet realize how much this truth would demand of her, how it would lead her into moments that would test her, break her, and ultimately remake her into someone entirely new. And that journey was only just beginning. That night, long after the encounter with the boy on the steps, Sara lay awake replaying his face in her mind. Those tear-streaked cheeks, the way his small shoulders trembled, it was as if she had looked straight into the center of someone's loneliness. She couldn't stop thinking about it. She didn't know his story, and maybe she never would, but that moment had anchored itself inside her like a seed waiting to grow. Over the next few days, the world felt even louder than before. Not in a chaotic way, but in a way that made her feel she was tuned to a frequency most people didn't hear. She noticed the way the cashier at the grocery store hesitated before smiling, as if hiding something heavy behind politeness. She noticed the way a neighbor's window light stayed on far too late at night. She even noticed her own breathing, slow and deep when she was calm, short and shallow when certain thoughts crossed her mind. It began to dawn on her that this sensitivity wasn't simply happening to her, it was calling her to act. To respond. She thought of the boy on the steps and wished she had done more than just ask if he was okay. She had been afraid to intrude, to overstep. But now, she wondered, maybe the world needed more people willing to overstep the boundaries of silence. One rainy afternoon, she found herself at a small park. It was mostly empty except for a woman sitting on a bench, holding an umbrella that did little to hide the tears streaking her cheeks. Sara hesitated. She could walk past and pretend she hadn't noticed, the way most people would. Or, she could listen to the pull in her chest. She sat down beside the woman. "It's a hard day, isn't it?" she said gently. The woman looked at her in surprise, and for a moment, Sara thought she'd made a mistake. But then the woman laughed weakly, the kind of laugh that's just a breath away from crying again. "It's been the hardest year of my life," she admitted. And just like that, words began spilling out, about a broken marriage, the loneliness that followed, and the way she had begun to doubt her own worth. Sara didn't try to fix anything. She didn't give advice. She just listened, letting the woman's voice fill the air until the rain slowed and the clouds began to break. When they parted, the woman squeezed Sara's hand and whispered, "Thank you for seeing me." That was when Sara truly understood, this sensitivity she'd been questioning wasn't a burden, it was a bridge. A way to see people not just for who they appeared to be, but for who they really were beneath the masks they wore. Still, it wasn't easy. Feeling deeply meant hurting deeply too. It meant carrying stories you couldn't always put down. Some nights she lay in bed with the echoes of strangers' pain rattling in her chest, and she wondered if she was strong enough to hold it all. One evening, Mira invited her to a small gathering. "You've been so in your own world," Mira said. "Come out, have some fun." Sara went, though she felt a little out of place. The music was loud, the conversations light and quick. But then, in the middle of the crowd, she caught sight of a young man standing alone by the balcony, looking out at the city lights. Something about his stillness drew her in. She joined him, and after a few moments of silence, he spoke without turning. "Do you ever feel like you're living in a world that's moving too fast for you?" Sara's heart skipped. "All the time," she replied. They talked for over an hour, not about small things, but about everything that mattered: fear, love, the strange ache of wanting to belong. She learned that he was an artist who had stopped painting because he didn't think his work mattered. She told him about the boy on the steps, the woman in the park, and the way her heart had been opening in ways she didn't understand. When she left that night, she realized something important: her sensitivity wasn't random. The universe was putting her in the path of people who needed her presence, even if just for a moment. It wasn't about changing their lives in big, dramatic ways. Sometimes, it was simply about letting them know they weren't invisible. And with that, she walked on, into a world that was still loud, still messy, still full of both joy and sorrow, but a world she now met with open eyes, an open heart, and a sensitivity she would never again mistake for anything less than a gift.